Hey there, my friend. Glad to have you back. If you're a Cowboys fan who's been eyeing the 2025 NFL Draft with a mix of curiosity and hope, you're not alone. And let me tell you, something very interesting is brewing right at the top of this draft board. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, former quarterback and current analyst Dan Orlovsky just threw out a take that's got everyone buzzing. He said Jackson Dart, yeah, the Ole Miss QB, might be headed for the top 10. And listen, I know that sounds bold, especially considering how crowded this quarterback class already is. But it actually might be great news for Dallas. Here's why. Think about teams like the Raiders, the Saints, and even the Seahawks, franchises that could be tempted to reach for a quarterback early. If Dart suddenly climbs the board, that's one more QB pushing other elite talents downward. That means wide receivers, edge rushers, and corners, guys the Cowboys might desperately need, could start sliding right into Dallas's lap at pick 12. This is exactly the kind of domino effect you want to see if you're rooting for impact players to fall. Every quarterback taken in the top 10 increases the odds that someone really special slips out of that range and becomes available when it's our turn on the clock. And just for fun, let's turn this over to you. Voting time. Do you actually believe Jackson Dart will go in the top 10? Yes or no? Drop your thoughts below. Which team do you think might shock the world and shake up the top of the draft board? Stick with me, because next we're diving into something a little more subtle, but just as revealing. Brian Schottenheimer recently dropped some clues about how the Cowboys are thinking heading into this draft, and if you read between the lines, it might just expose the whole plan. All right, now that we've looked at what's happening outside of Dallas in this draft, let's bring the focus back inside, because recently, Cowboys offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer sat down for an interview. And if you were paying close attention, he might have just given us a sneak peek at the team's draft strategy. Here's the quote that stood out to me. "We want the best player available after we take care of our needs." That's a pretty layered comment, right? At first glance, it sounds like the usual GM speak. But the key is in that second part. After we take care of our needs. That tells me the Cowboys are approaching this draft with a clear plan. First address the foundational gaps, and then swing big on a true difference maker. So what does that mean at pick 12? Schottenheimer made it clear the team is targeting what he called game changers. We're talking about guys who can take over a game, edge rushers who wreck pockets, wide receivers who flip field position in one play, and corners who erase an entire side of the field. The type of player you plug in on day one and watch the defense or offense instantly shift around them. And here's something else. There's been a noticeable shift in Dallas's roster-building philosophy. They're thinking from the outside in. Wide receivers, edge rushers, cornerbacks, players on the perimeter who can dictate the flow of a game. That tells me the trenches might not be the top priority early on. So now I'm curious what you think. Comment below. Who do you consider the biggest game changer in the 2025 draft class? Vote here. What position do the Cowboys need most at pick 12? Wide receiver, cornerback, edge, rusher, or offensive line? And coming up next, let's talk about a move the Cowboys already made that could shift their draft strategy even more. Yeah, we're diving into that trade for Joe Milton III and how it just might change everything. Okay, so here's where things start to get really interesting, because just when we thought we had a decent read on the Cowboys' strategy, they pulled off a surprise move, trading for quarterback Joe Milton III. Now, I know what you're thinking. Milton probably isn't coming in to compete with Dak Prescott. This wasn't a blockbuster, but it was strategic. And if we look closely, it says a lot about what the front office is thinking heading into the draft. First off, let's break down what this move changes. Before the trade, quarterback depth was one of those quiet concerns, especially with Dak's contract situation still floating out there. Bringing in Milton gives Dallas a developmental QB with elite physical tools, and it takes that pressure off the draft board. Translation? No more wasting mid-round picks on a flyer QB, but there's more. That trade also came with extra draft capital, and that's where things get spicy. With a few more chips to play with, the Cowboys now have real flexibility. They can stay at 12 and take whoever falls. Or, if someone they love starts slipping near the top 10, they might just move up. Now let's talk needs, because not everything is solved just yet. Wide receiver still feels thin after CeeDee Lamb. Cornerback remains a question mark with injuries piling up. And let's not forget defensive tackle, especially that one tech role that just hasn't been fully answered. Those are your 3 big red flags, even after the Milton deal. So let's bring this to you now. Comment below. What position do you think the Cowboys still need to fix before the draft kicks off? Vote here. Was the Joe Milton trade a smart move? Yes or no? All right. Now that we know where the roster stands and how the board might fall, it's time to step into the war room. Up next, we run a realistic simulation and see who actually falls to the Cowboys at pick 12. You might be surprised who's sitting there waiting. All right, you've stuck with me this far, so now it's time to get into the fun part. Let's run a real logical draft simulation and see what kind of names could be sitting there when the Cowboys are on the clock at pick 12. First things first, the top of the board is moving in a way that really helps Dallas. We already talked about Jackson Dart possibly sneaking into the top 10. Add in other quarterback-hungry teams, like the Raiders, Saints, and maybe even the Broncos, and you're looking at up to 4 QBs off the board early. That's a huge advantage for the Cowboys. Why? Because it pushes elite non-QB talent down. In most mock scenarios right now, names like Caleb Williams, Drake May, Shedeur Sanders, and Dart are going early. Then you've got a couple offensive tackles and maybe 1 or 2 defensive game wreckers coming off the board, like Dallas Turner or Jared Verse. That takes us to pick 10 or 11. Now let's play it out. At pick 12, based on the current buzz and team needs, here are a few very real names that could fall right into Dallas's lap. Tetai McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. Big, smooth, explosive. Think of him as a perfect WR2 who could eventually become a WR1. Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan. Locked down Big Ten talent who plays with confidence and discipline. He's exactly what Dan Quinn, or whoever ends up calling plays, would love. Shamar Stewart, defensive end from Texas A&M. A total athletic freak with elite upside off the edge. There's also a slim, but not impossible chance that someone like J.C. Latham, OT Alabama, or Mason Graham, DT Michigan, slides a bit. Either of those guys would be immediate starters and big-time contributors. Now, remember what we said last chapter? Dallas has some extra ammo from that Joe Milton trade. So if a guy like Will Johnson or Latham starts to slip into the 9-10 range, don't rule out a move up. But even staying put at 12, the board is lining up perfectly. You could land a potential star at a premium position without giving up a thing. That's the dream, right? So let's make this interactive. Comment below. If you were sitting in the war room as Cowboys GM, who are you grabbing at 12? Vote here. Would you trade up to secure a top-tier name or stay at 12 and take whoever falls? Coming up next, I'll tell you who I think should be the pick. A player who could be the next CeeDee Lamb in terms of draft value and impact. Trust me. You'll want to hear this. All right, let's not dance around it. If Tetai McMillan is there at 12, the Cowboys need to sprint to the podium. This guy checks every single box you want in a first-round wide receiver. Size? He's 6'5" with a big catch radius. Speed? He can stack corners and win deep. Route running? Polished. And maybe most important of all, he produces. He's, not just a physical talent. He puts up real numbers against real competition. But what makes this so exciting for us is how familiar this feels. Think back to 2020. CeeDee Lamb, widely regarded as a top 10 talent, somehow slipped all the way to Dallas at 17. And what did the Cowboys do? They trusted the board and made the smart pick. That move changed the offense overnight. Tetai McMillan could have the same kind of impact. Picture this. CeeDee Lamb operating out of the slot or pulling double coverage, while McMillan stretches the field on the outside. Suddenly, defenses have to pick their poison. That opens up the playbook and makes life a lot easier for Dak Prescott or whoever's under center. And let's not forget, Dallas needs a reliable WR too. Brandon Cooks has been solid, but he's not a long-term answer. McMillan could be. He gives you immediate production and future star potential. So here's my question for you. Comment below. Do you think Tedairoa McMillan is the right pick? Or would you go with someone else at 12? The 2025 draft is shaping up perfectly for the Cowboys to land another difference maker. Just like Micah, just like CeeDee, the stars are aligning. Now it's up to Dallas to not mess it up.